Welcome into day 2 of the NFL Draft as we are here live from Kansas City. Dan has joined me yet again for another edition of Mic'd Up with Fulton and Dan. Jake Fulton gets the day off after he and Brendan did 580 Sports Talk yesterday afternoon. Dan and I, as you can see if you are joining us on our YouTube live stream, are live from the NFL Draft, day 2, and boy, what a first round of the NFL Draft it was. We had a lot of trades. I believe 6 trades is what we ended up having in the first round last night. We had very interesting picks being taken, including 2 running backs inside the top 12, because apparently it is back to being 1982 in the NFL Draft at this point. The Detroit Lions are playing football as if it's 1953. It's just a great day. Dan with me as well. We have a lot to get to on the draft. We're going to recap the NFL Draft in the first round, give our thoughts on the first round of the draft that happened last night, and we'll get our thoughts on the newest Kansas City Chief, the K-State football standout, the Kansas City native, Felix and Uzama. King Felix is coming to Kansas City in a very pomp and circumstanced draft pick that happened at 31st overall last night. We'll look at what Felix and Uzama brings to the Chiefs, what he can contribute as well. We'll look at all the players the AFC West teams drafted, and by that I mean we'll look at 2 teams in the AFC West because Denver still has not selected a pick. They will eventually make their first pick of the draft at some point coming up this evening on day 2. We'll also look at some of the Chiefs' biggest competition, who they picked up, and how the draft may not have shook out the best way the Chiefs wanted to for what player they can end up taking, but more importantly, a lot of their most direct competition got a lot better in the draft yesterday evening. We also be joined by Matt Derrick. He will join us at the bottom of this hour to chat his thoughts on the Chiefs taking Felix and Uzama and what he thinks they might do coming up here on day 2 and even day 3 coming up tomorrow afternoon as well. Everyone loves the list today. It's simple. Who do we think are the best draft winners from last night? Who had the best draft picks for the best overall drafts after day 1? You can join in on the show on the text line as always. 785-272-9429 is that text line number, or you can join us on our YouTube live stream. You can go to youtube.com. Sports on 580 is that YouTube channel. Please subscribe if you have not. We would appreciate it. You can jump in on the live comment section as well. Dan, where I think we need to start above all else, the Kansas City Chiefs have a new edge rusher to join along with George Karlaftis on the outside, and there was a lot of mocks, and there were some rumblings that the Chiefs might take someone like Felix and Uzama at 31. There were some thoughts that just he would be a first-round pick in general, or he might not be a first-round pick. What are just your initial thoughts on the Chiefs actually having Felix and Uzama on this team being added to the pass rush rotation?
So, very cool moment, first and foremost, for the Chiefs to be able to make that pick in front of the home crowd last night in front of Union Station. They said they had 125,000 people through, and I think everybody who was there of the Chiefs fan persuasion stayed through all 31 picks. That's a grueling evening of standing around and waiting for your team to pick, and they were duly rewarded to get a chance to see the Chiefs make that pick. Clark Hunt announcing it on behalf of the team that he owns, and taking a kid from a Kansas State University from the greater Kansas City area, a lifelong Chiefs fan. It was a really neat way to cap the night. But beyond the good story, beyond the narrative, what the Chiefs have gotten in this draft is a young and toolsy and explosive and productive pass rusher who's only 21 years old, and I think that matters, who was the Defensive Player of the Year in the Big 12 Conference, one of 6 players from the conference drafted last night, and somebody who I think is going to be a great fit in the stable of pass rushers that the Chiefs have assembled. It's a group of players that you can move around. You can do a lot of different things with the edges that the Chiefs have now with Karlaftis, with Charles Amena, who recently signed, with Mike Dana, now with Felix. And I think you have a player here who's only going to get better. I think there's a ceiling for this player. Sometimes you draft a player and you get them kind of as is, and there's not a whole lot of growth that they can make. But I don't think that's the case for Felix and Uzama. I think there's a big ceiling for this pick, and I think the Chiefs have to feel like they're as well equipped to get the best out of him as any other team would be.
And I think bringing up the development of Felix and Uzama is a fantastic point, Dan, because think about his development just at Kansas State alone. Coming in there, recruited to play football at Kansas State, not the biggest guy when he was recruited, and then just in that developmental path, got so much bigger, got so much stronger. 19 and a half sacks his final 2 seasons at Kansas State, led the Big 12 in quarterback pressures. The Chiefs have attempted to strike this balance, I feel like, under Brett Veach, of they want athletes, particularly on defense, especially as of now. We saw that with kind of the change with the defense last year and all the young guys they went to, is they want athletes on defense, but they really do like proven college production. They think that if you are successful at the college level, that can be still at a level of an indicator for how you can be as an NFL player and as a pro. And I think that was a big reason why the Chiefs felt comfortable taking Felix Uzama. We'll hear from head coach Andy Reid and general manager Brett Veach coming up later on in the 1 o'clock hour of this show. But looking at it and discussing what the Chiefs were doing, what they were thinking, reportedly, according to Brett Veach, they had a first-round grade on Felix Uzama. Now, I'm not going to say that the Chiefs are that Brett Veach is blowing smoke there and just trying to justify the pick to its fan base there. But if they had a first round grade on him and he falls to you at pick 31, that's such a good spot for them to be in. Especially because I know, and we during our YouTube live stream last night, we're discussing, as there's the run on receivers, then Miles Murphy fell and Nolan Smith was falling as well, that we would thought about the Chiefs maybe trying to trade up. This is a case to where, one, I think they still made out well without being able to trade up, and two, I just don't think any team, especially in the AFC, wanted to trade with the Chiefs, so they want to give them more firepower.
Yeah, that Brett Veach kind of said that explicitly last night in his post-draft remarks. And again, we're going to hear from the Chiefs general manager. We'll rerun those remarks here a little bit later on this edition of Mic'd Up. But, yeah, it's not just as simple as, well, we would like to move up. And then it happens. It's not, you're not playing a video game here.
You can't just force the trade.
Yeah, you can't. There's no forced trade setting in the sliders. You gotta play the game. And I talked a lot yesterday when I was on with you, and we've talked a lot, I think, on both of our programs over the last week leading up to the draft, that the Chiefs were in position to let the draft come to them and not have to go and be aggressive unless there was a guy that they absolutely loved. And maybe there was a report out there that they were really interested in moving up to 26 with Dallas and almost pulled the trigger on a deal, except Dallas wanted Mozzie Smith, the defensive tackle out of Michigan. And when they heard that the Chiefs were interested in Mozzie Smith, that maybe that's who the Chiefs were going to target there at 26, the Cowboys stood pat because that was their guy. And so they took Mozzie Smith. And that's the way the draft works. That's kind of the game you have to play. When you pick at 31, you have to view that as a privilege. You get that because you had the most complete roster in the league last year because you won the Super Bowl. So the Chiefs had the luxury of being able to let the draft come to them. And they get a player. And I understand how draft reaction works. That if you're a fan of a team, you have your wish list of guys that you want to see the team take, right? Like you have an idea of who you want to see or your wish list for who might fall to your team at your pick. And you get really excited when that player's still on the draft board or it's getting closer and, oh man, 3 more picks and this guy falls to our team. And then when you don't get that guy and it's somebody else, I understand that you're a fan, there might be an element of disappointment there. Might be a feeling of, they didn't do what I would have. Got it wrong. Why didn't they do what I would have? Why didn't they? This one mock draft I read said they should have done. Why didn't they take the guy that everybody said was going to go in the top 10 and still there at number 31? Why didn't they do all that? Well, the neat thing about this pick is if that's the way you feel about the Chiefs taking Felix Uzama, all you got to do is, ask a friend, ask a neighbor, ask a family member, because chances are you probably know somebody who has watched a fair share of Kansas State football. And if you don't know anybody who's watched a fair share of Kansas State football, then you can take it from me, who's watched a fair share of Kansas State football. Because we'll all tell you, anybody who watched that team, who watched that player the last 2 years, he's a dude. And here's the thing about his production, which he had 11 sacks 2 years ago. Last year had 8.5 sacks. He did a lot of that in a 3-man front against double teams, because everybody in the Big 12 knew that was the guy you had to game plan against. If you were playing Kansas State, you had to pay extra attention to him. And the Kansas State defense put him in spots where there was the potential for a double team. They put him on the side with the tight end, or they put him as an end in a 3-man front. He's going to play in 4-man fronts in the NFL. He's going to have a chance to do one of the things that he does as well as anybody in this draft, and that is come off the edge with some power and with some speed and be productive and rack up some sacks. I think he's going to be a monster for this Chiefs defense in the long run. Only 21, a lot of room to grow. I really, really like the pick.
And that's the biggest thing. I think there's so much room to grow and where he can slot in. And in being in this area and having watched him play a lot of football, I think that's a great point of you look at production numbers, and numbers can only tell you about half a story, because you need to know how you arrived at those. It's one thing to rack up 8.5 sacks in a season, but you're playing in a traditional 4-down front. You're playing off the edge in a traditional set. You're getting one-on-ones against a tackle. And there's impressive things with that, because it means you're usually going up against a very good offensive lineman and trying to do these different things. It means to me so much more, and it can mean so much of a different thing when you're right. He got 8.5 sacks while facing a lot of double teams, while playing in a 3-down front, playing in such a different way than some of these other guys might have played and some of the other productions they might have had. Looking at what Felix Uzama brings to the Chiefs, is this a guy that you think can be a day one starter?
I think the potential is there. I also don't think they brought in Charles Omenihu to be rotational. Yeah. I think with a little bit more experience and with Karlaftis having been in the system for a year, I think those are maybe your week one starters, but there's absolutely starter potential for Felix. If he starts the year as a rotational guy, he's going to learn. Andy Reid talked about, and we'll hear from Andy Reid later on the program as well. He talked about Felix's ability to play the run, which I think is a little underrated. You look at his pass rushing numbers, and obviously those are the splashy numbers that stand out. But he made some impactful plays in the screen game. He made some impactful plays against the run, and he knows how to go hunt the football, punch football out. A lot of forced fumbles in his Kansas State career as well. So he projects long-term as a starter. It may not be the short haul. It may not be day one, but I think eventually he is going to be a guy who starts games in this league. I mentioned, if you're of a certain mindset as a fan, you go into the draft, they don't take your draft crush or the guy you love, then, there's that element of disappointment or feeling like, well, man, this wasn't necessarily how I thought this draft was going to go. Felix wasn't in a lot of mock drafts. He was in some first-round mocks, including The Ringer had him going to the Chiefs at number 31, and Danny Kelly at The Ringer, that was his final mock draft, was Felix to the Chiefs at 31. And if you're of that mind, and if you're a K-State fan, last night was a cause for celebration. We got a texter in on the text line from the 316 who was in our text yesterday saying it's going to happen. Felix to the Chiefs, 31. It's going to happen. He's tooting his own horn today in our text line. And you know what? 316, I would too. I would too. You called your shot, and it's exactly what happened. So that's a pretty, it's a extra kind of cool element about it for the K-State fans out there to get a chance to continue to root for a high character kid, somebody who was responsible for a lot of winning and a lot of great moments for Kansas State football, particularly last year in their Big 12 championship season. And now they keep rooting for him on the team that Felix himself grew up rooting for. Pretty neat.
I think that's the other, great part of this entire thing is, sometimes the draft stories do not come together as much as you would like or you would hope. Sometimes it'd be a great story for a certain player to go to a certain team because of lineage or background or where they're from or things like that, and sometimes the fit doesn't work, so it actually is kind of better that it didn't happen. But for a team like the Chiefs that needed at least a piece of edge help in this draft, to which you said if they stood pat, that edge would probably be where they would go if they stood pat, and that is what ends up happening. For them to be able to couple getting a great player with also adding in the story and the background to it, I think is so great as well. Looking at if the Chiefs were trying to trade up last night and if they didn't, and I think it works out, and we're going to be, that might be a thought for a long time, where Felix Uzama's career might be compared to some of the guys in that mid-20 spot and some of those different players that were taken. And it, is it, in hindsight, is it upsetting that the Chiefs weren't able to make a deal? Do you think with the Chiefs trying to move up, was there a particular player do you think was, a real signifier to you in hearing more about Brett Veach talking about how, we made some calls that just didn't go through? Is there any particular player or players you think were the ones you would think, yeah, that's where they were trying to move to get that guy, and I'm kind of bummed it didn't work out?
Well, it sounds like Mozzie Smith was somebody very high on
Yeah.
their list, but I got to be honest, I think Felix is a better fit than Mozzie Smith would have been, and much more productive. Like the athleticism, the tools, the explosiveness at defensive tackle. Like Mozzie Smith has rare tools, but it's not to say that Felix doesn't.
No.
And also, Felix was super productive in college.
Incredibly
11 sacks
so.
2 years ago, 8.5 sacks in the Defensive Player of the Year in the Big 12 Conference last year. So I think I would have preferred, like, if it had been those two guys on the draft board and it's one of those two, I would have said Felix without hesitating. So I think, but there's that. I know there was also some thought about, oh man, move up for Nolan Smith. We talked about it on the live stream, the draft live stream last night.
He's too small for the Chiefs.
Yeah, it doesn't fit what the Chiefs do and what they like from hand in the dirt for 3 defensive ends. The wide receiver group, hard to move up and go get those wide receivers. Look where those wide receivers and tight ends went. All the guys that we had our eyes on last night as being Chiefs target. Where'd Zay Flowers go? Baltimore. Where'd Quentin Johnson go? The Chargers. Where'd Dalton Kincaid go? The Bills. What do all those teams have in common?
They're trying to take down the Chiefs.
They're all trying to beat the Chiefs in the AFC.
They are not in for a moment. Are they going to make a trade with them?
Yeah, exactly. So the way the board fell and the way that the picks there in the 20s kind of fell, it was going to be difficult, I think, for the Chiefs to really be aggressive and move up if wide receiver was what they wanted. And that's the other thing about the wide receiver position is there's some premium talents in the first round, but there's a lot of really good players still left at that position, and that might be where they make a move today. If they look to make a jump in the draft today, it might be for a pass catcher, a wide receiver.
That's what I really think. And we'll get to our thoughts coming up here later on in the show, what Dan and I think the Chiefs will do here in round 2 and round 3 on day 2 of the NFL draft. Right now, we're going to take our first time out. When we come back, it's time for On Second Thought, but specifically an On Second Thought edition. Which GMs made the biggest mistake last night? We'll get to that coming up next. time for a little on second thought here on Mic'd Up with Fulton and Dan. And Dan, normally when Jake and I do this segment, it is something that we screwed up on this week, that we want to recant on, kind of get our mulligan. We're going to do it a little different today. Looking back at what happened in the first round of the NFL draft last night, what team do you think is going right now, looking at the team and going, oh, I wish we had a do-over?
I'm sure that none of them would say they wish they had a do-over.
Or if you were them, you would say they do need a do-over. That's true.
I'm sure most of the teams are thrilled with
they're like, I did this all right.
Them, but I will say that it is stunning in the year 2023 that a team with 2 top 20 picks used them on a running back and a linebacker. The Detroit Lions came out of yesterday with Jahmyr Gibbs and Jack Campbell. And look, Jack Campbell won the Butkus.
Yeah.
Jahmyr Gibbs is a playmaker. Those are good football players. But the idea of value in the draft is not something that we discuss idly, right? Like that matters. And the reason it matters is because those are the kinds of players typically you can get much later in the draft. And I don't think anybody was beating down the door to take Jahmyr Gibbs, especially for the Lions, who they got DeAndre Swift in the second round 2 years ago. And now they turn around and we need to replace DeAndre Swift with the second best running back in this draft at number 12 overall. That was bonkers to me. I don't know what the hell the Lions are doing. It was a very, you said at the top, very 1953 draft, a running back and a linebacker in the top 20.
I truly don't know what the Lions were doing because, like, Jahmyr Gibbs at 12, Jahmyr Gibbs, I mean, maybe you think, because I had Jahmyr Gibbs mocked at 30 to Philadelphia.
I did too. I thought he might go late first round.
Yeah, I thought there, but like at 12, that is just an insane pick. And then even more insane than that was the fact that they took Jack Campbell, mighty fine football player, I think he'll be a good NFL football player. But him at 18 is just ridiculous. But moreover, because the Lions aren't the only team that I kind of want to make fun of a little bit. What are the Atlanta Falcons doing? I get Bijan Robinson, fantastic player. I get it. Bijan Robinson is a potentially generational running back talent, and because of that, I get wanting to put him on your football team and kind of saying what we have be damned. We talked about you have Tyler Algier, who was a guy you got the 6th round,
I think it was 1,000
yards
last year, yeah,
and got 1,000 yards. Like, if the idea is we need to give Desmond Ridder some offensive help, there's so many other places you could go than picking a running back at 8th overall. Positional value is important, and there's a reason we always bring it up. In the fact that not 1 but 2 running backs went in the top 12, that just feels ridiculous.
Yeah, that's pretty amazing. And look, I mocked Bijan Robinson to Atlanta. I had heard those rumors enough that I thought that might happen. And look, it's not uncommon now for teams to have 2 running backs and split the job share a little bit. But it's just, again, it's a question of value.
Yes.
And it's a question of understanding. Like, you found a 1,000-yard back in the 6th round last year. Whatever your weaknesses are as a team, and if you're the Atlanta Falcons, you got a hell of a lot of weaknesses.
Yeah, you
running
do.
back really isn't one of them. So you miss a chance to fortify a weakness and instead add to a position that's arguably a strength in a way that you did last year on day 3. It shows a misunderstanding of what the draft is and how you have to value players.
It makes absolutely no sense, and it still baffles me so much when I think back on those picks. Coming up at the bottom of this hour, we had to just make a change to Matt Derrick. So coming up next after this timeout, we're going to hear from Brett Veach and Andy Reid and get their thoughts on the Chiefs' first day of the NFL draft. Welcome back into Mic'd Up with Fulton and Dan, live from the NFL Draft in Kansas City. On a media row are Dan Lucero and myself. Thank you all for joining as always. Dan, we just spoke this briefly off air, but of course, reports are coming out on what people think of different players and their comps and things like that. You just told me the idea of the comp for Devin Witherspoon, both mentally and physically, and I think it's the greatest comp I've ever heard.
Devin Witherspoon. So The Ringer does really great draft content. TheRinger.com. Danny Kelly's their draft guy, and he was one of a few. Herbie Teope's another one from out of Kansas City. But Danny Kelly, one of the few national guys who correctly mocked Felix and Uzomah to Kansas City. Anyway, he does his player comparisons. And Devin Witherspoon, who was number 5 overall pick to Seattle, his comparison on Witherspoon was Jair Alexander physically, Cam Chancellor spiritually. And it makes a lot of sense. He's a Seahawk man, doesn't it?
It makes a lot of sense. The NFL Draft was fun on day one for the Kansas City Chiefs. They ended up taking Felix and Uzomah with their first pick. And to hear about what they think with this pick, we'll hear from Brett Veach and Andy Reid here at the bottom of this hour. As we had to shift Matt Derrick. He will join us now at the bottom of the 1 o'clock hour. But Andy Reid spoke to the media after the NFL Draft's first round conclusion yesterday. Here's what Big Red had to say about Felix and Uzomah and how the first round of their draft went.
With our first pick here, we are glad to welcome aboard and DK Uzomah. How did I do? That was good. Felix. And Felix is a heck of a player from Kansas State, defensive end. We love his ability to rush the passer and play the run. He does both very well. He's also a Kansas City native here, so we appreciate that part of it too. But most of all, a good football player. When you're picking right there at 31, you try to take the best player that's available to you on the board, and and he was that guy. And so we feel very comfortable bringing him into our program. Great kid. Had a chance to hang with him here during our local pro day, and enjoyed talking with him and visiting with him there. So that time's yours.
What was the conversation like when you placed the call and, on his end, they're seeing, whatever head drive coming up across the car?
Yeah, so Brett called him initially and talked to him. By the time I got to him, there was he couldn't hear me, I couldn't hear him. So I was just passing the phone on, but he was obviously at a party. There was a party going on there. Yeah.
When you draft a guy like that, how much is Spags in your ear about how he fits with what he likes to do on defense?
Yeah, no, Spags and our defensive staff did a great job of sorting all these guys out. Joe Cullen and is relentless with the value. He evaluates everybody. You just give him somebody. You find somebody that says defensive line on, he's going to evaluate him. That's Joe Cullen I'm talking about. So he loved him. Spags loved him, and it was pretty easy decision right there.
And what do you see as his readiness? How close is he to being able to help you out right away?
Yeah, no, I think he'll definitely, be able to, bar an injury or something like that, Adam, but I think he'll be able to help us right away. Yeah.
In both phases of the game, pass rush, run down.
Yeah, sure. No, I think he can give you a good amount of snaps in both places.
Andy, how much really is obviously his position as a premium position in the league? How much of your guys' thinking was attacking edge rusher in this first round versus that's just the best player that you had?
Yeah, well, we kind of start there in the offensive line and check those out and make sure we're in good position in both. And we thought we could use another defensive lineman, either interior or an edge rusher or an edge player. And so he fits into that.
Do you feel like this time of year, I mean, in comparison to the last years, I realize you might not be able to count those off the top of your head, but just that need feels maybe less severe than other times in the draft?
Yeah, I'd probably tell you yes. I feel that way. Yeah. But what you want to do is you want to bring in guys that can play, but also add great competition. That kind of makes everybody better. And particularly when you're down there low. I thought Brett did a great job of staying disciplined with what the board was showing him and not going somewhere of just absolute need, So, and some of that's because we don't have a lot of those.
Fair to say you see him fitting in the role Frank Clark used to have in that Leo, kind of opposite where George played most last year?
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see where he's most comfortable, what side he's most comfortable on, and go from there. But I think he'll work in. We'll have a nice rotation there, I think, once it's all said and done.
What Joe Cullen was able to do with George last year and how productive he was down the stretch, how confident are you that he could maybe do the same with Davis?
Yeah, I think I think you get that same play time amount from him. Again, we'll just see. I mean, that's a long ways away, but we felt comfortable enough in the first round to take him and not trade ourselves out of the first round, which we had opportunities to do, but we felt we wanted to stay right there and take him.
Coach, you said, when you had the local pro day, what did he do that stood out that, from the rest of the local talent that you outside to go in that direction?
Well, he didn't work out. He stood right next to me. So, he didn't, he came up just to kind of talk to us and didn't do his workout at that time.
Andy, last year, George Karlaftis was known for playing a lot of snaps, being durable in his college career. Felix seems to have the same sort of makeup. Just how much of that is a benefit to the scouting and obviously getting enough tape to see what he can do for Spags and Joe Cullen?
Yeah, I think that's, that was big for that part of it. I know our guys came out feeling very comfortable about the way he plays, and I think I'm answering your question there. But I mean, I think the guys, they felt comfortable with all the stuff that they saw there. Yeah.
He just turned 21 in January. How do you guys kind of see him evolving over the next few years?
Yeah,
So what you going to work on?
Yeah, he's young. Listen, you're going to see growth in that first year, and probably a little bit less the second year, but you'll still get some. I mean, that's normal. again, I'd like to get hands on them before I start filling all that in, right?
Coach, just looking at the human element, the Chiefs just won the Super Bowl, the draft is in Kansas City, you just took a Kansas City kid. Just how special is that?
Yeah, I think it's neat. And then, the draft's right here in Kansas City. I know the people down at the draft were excited. We had it on the TV and they were fired up about it. So Kansas State, Kansas City, it's and then the draft, I think that's a real positive. I was proud of our fans. I mean, they showed up like crazy today down there. That was a neat deal.
Andy, you said you had opportunities to trade out. I mean, did you seriously consider that? I just wondered if Clark had any, pull in that situation to want to announce that version of him.
Yeah, well, I don't think he would have risked that, if we felt like we wanted to trade out. So, but you get to that point, and people, if you're that pick, you're going to have opportunities to trade out. And so people were calling us, but again, we felt very comfortable taking them.
That is Chiefs head coach Andy Reid speaking after the selection of Felix Uzama yesterday. He got the pronunciation down pretty quickly.
Yeah,
I think
did.
that's the toughest part.
He nailed that. Yeah, that is the hardest thing for Chiefs fans who might be unfamiliar. Enrique Uzama.
That is the correct way. There are certain broadcasters out there who struggle a little bit during some K-State games to get that right.
That's a fact.
That is
what up, Tim Brando?
That is what Andy Reid had to say earlier.
I didn't say that.
Well done. Here's what Brett Veach had to say as the general manager of the Kansas City Chiefs spoke after the pick of Felix Uzama last night as well.
Needless to say, we're excited to add Felix to this roster, and just want to first give a shout out to the amazing fans that filled the streets downtown. What an awesome sight! What an awesome night for Kansas City. All the feedback I got from all the NFL members downtown working this game, they couldn't be more excited for the turnout tonight. And again, quite an exciting night for us, and excited to add Felix to this roster. And with that, I'll take your questions.
What was the conversation like when you first, called him and, he sees one area of draft coming up on his caller ID?
Oh, no, he was super excited. And, it's one thing, obviously, just to get drafted in the NFL, but then to have a local kid to get that call on draft night while the draft's being held in Kansas City, needless to say, he was really excited. And, obviously the conversation went really well.
Brett, what jumps out to you as a prospect looking at him over the last few years?
Yeah, well, we had a chance to see him obviously for playing right down the road there in Manhattan. But one of the younger guys in the draft too. I think he's just turned 21, and he's done nothing but grow and develop. Throughout the last couple of years, and we're excited for Steve and for Joe Cullen to get their hands on him now and continue that growth and trajectory uphill. But again, anytime you can add a premium position and one of the youngest players in the draft and have that to work with for a long time is something we're excited about.
You guys rotate your linemen a lot. Just how confident are you that by maybe day one you get into that regular rotation?
Yeah, no, I feel real good, especially about, not just the prospect, but the coaching staff we have. I mean, those guys, great teachers, great coaches. And, we had an opportunity to spend a lot of time with Felix, again, being so close. So, again, Joe's excited, Steve's excited, and, I think he'll come right in here, and having him next to George now for the next, handful of years is something that those guys will quickly develop a bond. They'll be a good 1-2 tandem there for the next few years.
You mentioned when you guys got on the clock, was he the clear-cut top guy left on your board? Was there a group there that you had to choose?
No, he was the top guy. And, we did have some calls. And I think maybe Coach mentioned that. It's a situation, though, when you have a guy that is, clearly the top guy left, and then the calls that we had were you're talking mid-40s. It's a long way away, and then you're going to end up just trading those picks to try to get back up and get a guy like Felix. So we thought, let's not get cute here. There's a guy we like, position that we need, and we'll just go ahead and make the pick, and certainly glad we did.
What about the possibility of trading up earlier in the round? How close were you close at all?
We had conversations, and some of the teams that we spoke to earlier in the day. I mean, the price was pretty steep at the time, and then there was a window. I think minus the Bills moving up 2 spots with the 4. There was conversation that we had with teams, but when it was their time to pick, they just they were staying. They weren't trading. So, Jacksonville had that small move with Buffalo there and the teams around, they were not interested in trading. And then teams higher than that, the asking price was a lot. And, having picks the next couple of days, having a 2, 3, 2 4s, we still want to deal in volume here. We want to get some good players. And, we just thought it was, the best to keep those picks and to have Arsenal the next few days.
Right.
You mentioned some of these.
You mentioned just the premium position. Did you go into this draft saying you got to get an edge rusher in the first X amount of rounds or anything?
Well, I think, just looking at our roster, I mean, there were check boxes that we wanted to address throughout the weekend. And, whether that was defensive end or a skill position or offensive line or what have you, we just wanted to come away with one of those premium positions right off the bat and then work from there and see how the board goes. But again, when we were sitting there at 31, I mean, he was the top guy on the board, and it made that decision easy.
So did he rise up your board specifically because of your need or because of his position?
Well, he was on, or are you asking if he rose as the draft was going on, or
just
no?
Even before the draft was in place, and was it more based on where your need or just the player himself?
Really, the player himself. We're going to set our board, and our board is going to stay locked in, and then we're just going to follow the board. And then when we get to our pick, I mean, it's pretty easy. I think when you sit that board and stay true to it, and when you get to your pick, you face that a decision of, take the highest guy on your board or trade down. And again, then you're looking at a scenario where you're just probably trying to trade back up to get the same player. So he was a top guy on the board. He was positioned in need, so it made sense at the time. And, again, certainly excited for the next few days and the additional picks we have coming up.
Brett, how do you feel now about that group of guys you have on the edge?
Yeah, no, I mean, listen, it's a good group. We got a lot of young guys now. We brought in Charles, and we have some flex with Charles, and now we have George. Felix is in there, and certainly with Chris. Turk Wharton's coming back from an injury now, so we're excited to get him back, and he looks good. So, again, you can't have enough depth on that defensive line, and that's something we're always gonna look to add, and so we're excited to add Felix tonight and get ready for tomorrow and for Saturday.
You mentioned some of the excitement from Joe and Spags about getting Felix. What is it about Felix that excites them, and even what excites you about having him on this program?
Just the motive, the relentless effort. Again, a guy that had a ton of production at Kansas State, and as I mentioned, just turned 21. So a majority of this production was coming in a big time conference at 19 and 20 years old. So I think every year he's been there, you can see the growth and development, and being so young, still think there's a huge window for him to continue to grow and develop. And we're excited that we get him at this stage of his career and being so young. Got a lot of years to work with him and continue to grow and develop him.
Brett, Andy credited you for having discipline tonight. How difficult was it to maintain discipline?
Yeah, it's one of those things where you're just trying to calculate, and when you're on the clock there, and teams are trying to trade up there right at the end, just trying to read the board. And I think it wasn't that hard, just because again the trade offers were so far down in the mid 40s, where you just try to quickly do the math in your mind and think about the board and how it's likely to play out tomorrow. Just the fact of the matter was, it was just a matter of us having to use a lot of those assets to go right back up. And sometimes you get too cute, you just miss out on a good player. So we just wanted to sit there and do what made sense, and that was just make the selection.
How many guys did you have first round grades on this year? Is Felix one of them?
I think we had, a handful of guys, 16, 18 guys, and, Felix was right up there in that list. I mean, these lists are different depending on whether or not you count the quarterbacks, right? So, we have a little different model that we use just to kind of project where guys are going to go and what we're going to do. But, I think all these teams, by the time you get to the 20s, you're picking on guys, though, that, if they're not first round value picks, they're high too. So, these drafts turn into, first rounders are 15, and then even the picks at, 25, 28, 30, they're right there. So these values are all the same when you get to pick 31.
It seemed like around 20 there was that wide receiver run, and then pretty meaty additional fit maybe for the Chiefs. That how did the strategy change maybe like during that point? Was there temptation to maybe overspend and try to get someone in that window?
Yeah, I mean it like you said, Pete, the run was there with the wideouts there, and we had gotten out in front of that, though, and I think we kind of knew where the market was, and obviously there were a few teams that were up there that were AFC teams and they weren't interested in talking to us and trading with us. And, after you get locked out of there of not being able to trade, then it comes into, we will do it, but it's going to be, the asking price is going to be even more than what you would think. So just one of those things that you just got to stay disciplined and know that the object is to fill out a deep, talented roster. And, you have to work with the strength of numbers. And obviously our guys do a great job of identifying talent throughout the course of the draft. And so I think that's, the part of just being disciplined there. You could be too aggressive at times, but, when teams want it's a little bit tougher sometimes when you're dealing with teams in certain positions that are in your division or conference or what have you, or teams that you're likely to play that, the asking price may be more. So, we were aware of that. And then it was just a matter of, doing what made sense for our team in the long run.
Brett, he seems like a pretty durable player given the last 2 years. I just wonder if that was an element of it too, and if the medical situation was minimal, I guess, compared to maybe other.
Durable, healthy, young, and again, a guy that plays a premium position, a guy that has continued to grow and develop, and again, had a lot of exposure of seeing him a ton and got a chance to meet with him on multiple occasions. But certainly that played into it. And again, a ton of production for a guy that really did the bulk of that work at 19, 20 years old in those big time conferences, going against some really good tackles the last couple of years. I mean, a lot of these guys have gotten drafted early and played early, and they've had success in the NFL. So, sky's the limit there. And, with our coaching staff, we're excited for him to come in here and continue this upward trajectory.
Last one, Herb. Not Coach. Brett, when first round in the books now, and you just reset your draft board for day 2 of the draft, what would you say your priorities are going into day 2, specific to wide receiver and maybe even offensive tackle?
Yeah, I think with, maybe, Herb, you can make a case for other than the linebacker. I think, again, I've been down this road a few times, and you may go into a season and thinking that you're good at a position. Then, a couple of years ago, I think our first Super Bowl run in 19, we lost 3 defensive ends, within a matter of 3 or 4 weeks. So you got to plan and prepare for a 20-game season, hopefully. And I think when you have that mindset, these guys that line up and start week 1, they never end up, being the same starting lineup week 17, 18, 19, 20 into the playoffs. So, other than positions, I think that we just have numbers and there's just not enough play time to go around. I think, anything's on the table, whether it be offensive line, more defensive line, cornerbacks, receivers. And that's where I think you just stay true to the board. And when you have a guy that, when, the value fits where you're picking, and, other than you can make case for linebacker, I think anything can be on the table for sure.
Brett, last week I believe you mentioned about the wealth of defensive backs in this year's draft. And just listen to that from what you said. Obviously, you spent a lot of premium on defense and defensive backs last year. Is that still in your thought process, a position of need as the race to depth you talked about?
Well, I think it's an opportunity where it's a one of those, premium positions. And I think you're going to find a lot of guys that are super talented and come in right away and not just make the team, but push for playing time. So anytime you have one of those positions and you have a lot of depth in numbers, and I don't think you discount, maybe you need another this or that when you have a guy that you think is like tomorrow, if we're picking at 63 and there's a guy that, we felt is a second round talent cornerback and, he's on the board. I think, you'd stay true to the board just like we did tonight.
That is Chiefs General Manager Brett Veach speaking after their first-round selection in the NFL Draft. We got so much more draft coverage coming at you. We are live from the NFL Draft in Kansas City on Radio Road. Dan Lucero and myself. Coming up in the 1 o'clock hour of the show, we're going to take a look at how the AFC West and different Chiefs opponents in the AFC got better in their first-round draft picks. We'll also speak with Matt Derrick as well. And plus, everyone loves a list. Who do we think had the best drafts in round 1 last night? All that more coming up next in the next hour of Mic'd Up here on 580 WIBW. It is time for hour number 2 of Mike's Up with Fulton and Dan on this Friday afternoon. We are live from day 2 of the NFL Draft in Kansas City on Radio Row. I got Dan Lucero joining me for another edition of Mike's Up. Dan, thank you so much again for filling in for Jake these past 2 days.
Hey, it has been my pleasure to experience this time slot, this audience, and hang out with you the last couple of days. I hope the listeners haven't been too bothered by the change. I am no Jake LeBon. I will be the first to say it.
I would agree.
I know Jake LeBon. Jake LeBon is a friend of mine, and I, sir, am no Jake LeBon. But we are having some fun out here. We are in we are on Radio Row in the Westin, in the Crown Center, just steps away from Union Station, and where all of the excitement is going on here in Kansas City. Day 2 of the draft, night 2, I guess, will start at 6 o'clock Central Time with the first, second round picks soon to follow. And we'll have the second and third rounds tonight. And a little bit later on, we'll talk about what the Chiefs' outlook is going to be for tonight. The Chiefs hold pick number 63, the final pick of the second round. They also have the 95th pick of the third round. There are 102 picks in the first 3 rounds. So lots of picks, lots of great players still to come off the board here tonight. And excited to talk a little bit more about that a little bit later on, and also talk about some of the players who went to some other places in round 1 of the draft.
Right here in this 1 o'clock hour, we are going to look at the members of the AFC West selected last night, naming the Las Vegas Raiders and the Los Angeles Chargers, as the Denver Broncos have yet to make a selection. They will make one allegedly today.
Remind me why they don't have a first or second round pick.
Dan, I would love to remind you of that. Will you remind me, please? They sent a few first rounders to your Seattle Seahawks and a second rounder for Russell Wilson, a.k.a. Mr. Unlimited, a.k.a. Mr. 4 Wins.
It was 2 first round picks. And it was 2 second round picks. It was last year's, and then it was this year's. And so that bummy ass team didn't get to pick in the first or the second round in either of the last 2 years. But they got Sean Payton, so everything's fixed. Everything's fixed in Denver town.
Let's remember this more importantly, Dan. They could have tried to draft in the first round this year, but they also sent more picks away to get Sean Payton.
Yeah, they did. Yeah. So
let's remember that.
They did. They traded. They got a first-round pick for Bradley Chubb, and then they gave that away so they could hire Sean Payton. Last scene being portrayed by Kevin James in an incredibly bad Netflix movie.
Did you watch that movie?
Of course not. No,
okay, I haven't either. I just had to ask.
Some movies like last night we were on the draft live stream. And by the way, folks, if you missed any of our live stream last night, it was a hoot. We were live, all four of us,
were chilling
for 4 hours. Big chilling, eating snacks. I was playing video games at one point.
Dan was.
Fulton was watching the Royals, having his nightly existential crisis, watching Royals baseball. The whole thing is archived on our YouTube page. So if you're watching us now, you're already subscribed. You know the deal. If you're not, go find us on YouTube at Sports on 580 WIBW on YouTube. And you can watch the whole first round back and experience it with us. See the faces we make, the faces of surprise and glee and other things, maybe disgust at times as well when certain draft picks were announced. But I digress. So on the what was I talking about?
We're making fun of the Denver Broncos and all the picks they traded.
We were. Oh no, we're talking about movies.
Oh yes, we went to the Kevin James.
So last night we were talking about the movie Draft Day.
Yes,
I firmly believe is the worst sports movie ever made. Trouble with the Curve is the worst baseball movie ever made. And it is a close second when it comes to worst sports movies of all time. Trouble with the Curve sucks. I can't believe Clint Eastwood and Amy Adams, like likable actors, like Clint Eastwood, legend. Terrible movie. That movie stinks. Draft Day. Stupid. Just the stupidest movie in the world. Worst football movie. If you even call it a football movie, because it's just behind the scenes stuff. Anyhow. I've seen those movies, and I pass judgment on those movies based on having seen those movies. I have not seen, what's it called, Home Team with Kevin James?
I don't know.
The adaptation of the Sean Payton story. All I need to do is watch the preview. I watched the 2-minute trailer, and if that was the best stuff, the stuff that was supposed to make me want to watch the movie, then I can guarantee you that movie is absolute trash.
I would not be surprised, and I will also probably never watch that. I also have never seen Draft Day nor Trouble with the Curve. Dan apparently believes I should watch Trouble with the Curve just to know how bad of a baseball movie it is.
You've got to watch. It stinks so
I'll
bad.
add it to the growing list of films I need to watch. Coming up here in the 1 o'clock hour, like I said, we'll look at what teams the Chiefs are in draft competition with, who they drafted in the first round. We got Everyone Loves a List. Who had the best draft last night? Giving through all the picks, different players selected, which teams did the best drafts last night. Derrick will join us at the bottom of this hour, our good friend from ChiefsDigest.com. We'll get Matt's thoughts on the Chiefs taking Felix and Udike Uzama with their 31st pick, the first pick for the Chiefs in the first round last night, and maybe get his thoughts on who they might take here on day 2 and even day 3 coming up tomorrow from Kansas City. And then 2 o'clock hour, we will look and give our thoughts on who the Chiefs might take in day 2. We are off early today at 2:30, so this is our last full hour of the program. We are off at 2:30 for Kansas City Royals baseball. They have pregame starting at 2:30. We'll hand it off to the Royals Radio Network. They have a 3:10 first pitch with the Minnesota Twins as Pablo Lopez takes on the Royals tonight. And to which I just asked Dan, will the Royals score a single run off Lopez?
Yeah, they might get one.
Okay.
Do we have a bit of Royals news to pass along?
We do have a bit of Royals news to pass off, Dan, if you want to do the honors.
Yeah, so the Royals called Nick Prado up from AAA Omaha today, and they have inserted him straight into the lineup at first base. So it will be Prado in the lineup tonight. Freddie Fermin sent down. So this tells you two things. Number one, Salvador Perez must be feeling better because they would not have sent down a catcher if there was still a concern about an injury to Salvador Perez. And number two, the other thing that this tells you is, in fact, Perez is in the lineup tonight. He's catching and batting third. The other thing this tells you is this feels like they want to give Nick Prado a run of at-bats here.
Yeah.
I think they want to give him a run of at-bats, potentially at first base. Maybe that moves Vinny to DHing some of those games. But this feels like a real chance to give Prado a look. So he'll be in the lineup tonight. He is batting sixth for the Royals. It's about as strong a lineup as they can field, to be completely honest with you, even with the presence of Hunter Dozier. It's, Witt, Pat, Vinny, Salvi, MJ, clean up in right field, Eddie O, and then Prado at first. And I'm excited to see how that pans out against a tough pitcher. It
is. And to round out that lineup, Kyle Lisbell, Hunter Dozier, and Michael Massey round out the 7, 8, 9. So that is what the Royals will do tonight. We'll look a little bit at that as the show goes on, but it has been a rough going as they fell 7-1 last night, and Zach Greinke had another rough start on the road. But back to the NFL draft, Dan, where things were not as rough for some teams, but for the Kansas City Chiefs in their direct competition, they got a lot better last night with some of their first-round picks. Let's start in the division in the AFC West. Only one pick apiece for the Las Vegas Raiders and the Los Angeles Chargers. They only ended up making one selection each, but they got themselves a good amount of players. Let's start with the Las Vegas Raiders. They draft Tyree Wilson, the edge out of Texas Tech. We talk about the Raiders needing a lot of help, namely on the defensive side of the football, because they just have, Max Crosby and then just a bunch of guys out there on defense. I really thought they might go defensive back here. That's why I had mocked Devin Witherspoon going to them here. But also thought Christian Gonzalez being on the board is where they might have gone as well. But they go edge with the pass rush to get after Patrick Mahomes. With Tyree Wilson going to the Raiders, they still have, the corpse of Chandler Jones being employed on their football team at this moment in time. Does that surprise you at all that they went Tyree Wilson with the fact that they technically have two starting edge rushers, or are the Raiders going with the idea of partially beat the Chiefs, you got to get for the quarterback with 4, therefore we need a stud pass rusher?
Yeah, I think that is the thought process for Las Vegas. It's not a surprise that they went defense. I think a lot of people had them looking at maybe a cornerback in the mock draft. There was some thought that they would look at one of the quarterbacks, but quite obviously the only people that evaluated Will Levis as a first-round pick were people in the mock draft industry and not in the NFL industry, because obviously he did not get selected last night. So it's not a surprise that the Raiders went defense. Tyree Wilson is maybe the best athlete, just like the in terms of like the physical attributes. Mm-hmm. He might be the best athlete of any of the edge rushers in the draft.
Yeah.
Crazy athletic. Every time I watched him at Texas Tech, and I didn't watch every Texas Tech game last night. I'm not going to pretend I ate the Tyree Wilson team. But I watched a good number of Texas Tech games last night. I watched him play KU, watched him play K-State, watched him in a couple of other games. And every time I saw him play, he stood out. He flashed. He was a game wrecker. He is a guy I think can be very impactful in the NFL. The question is going to be the foot injury. And that might have scared some teams off. Maybe he goes higher if not for the injury history. But the size and the athleticism, that's the total package is there. And the Raiders have always drafted, the toolsy guy, the guy who's the fastest to his position. That's the history of the Raiders, right? So they're taking a gamble on the upside with Tyree Wilson, and I think it's significant upside. And him next to Max Crosby should be a strong bookend of pass rushers for the next few years.
I was very upset when the Raiders took Tyree Wilson last night, because it means that they're being intelligent and they're trying to make proper picks, and that's a gigantic bummer. The other pick in the AFC West, because just a reminder, because it's really fun to say, Denver did not pick. They will not pick until the 90s tonight.
Yeah,
they trade up.
First pick is
in
90? Third round. It is 67 and 68. They have a pair of third rounders tonight.
Good for them.
They got a pick from Indianapolis. I don't remember when that happened or how that came to be.
That's a good question.
But, they're early in the third round today. They'll get a chance to make a couple of picks and add to that roster.
For the Los Angeles Chargers, their pick last night, Quentin Johnston, wide receiver out of TCU, to add something to their pass-catching core to, kind of pair with Mike Williams and Keenan Allen for the, 17 snaps. All three will be healthy at the exact same time. I feel, and I made this kind of joke on the live stream last night when we were all live streaming the draft, this makes me actually have to care about the Chargers a little bit, because not that I always, toss them to the side. I'm not that much of have that much of a low thought of them, but this is a really talented, legit wide receiver that, more importantly, at his size of 6'4", has some good weight to him, good catch radius, and more importantly, he is a yak guy. He can run after the catch. He can break a lot of tackles. He runs after the catch. This, to me, makes me feel like the Chargers have not that they will unseat the Chiefs as the number one team in the AFC West. Until I see it, I'm always going to think the Chiefs are going to be that first team, because they've won the division 7 consecutive years at this point. But this feels like the Chargers really making a move that, if they supplement it properly through the rest of this draft, they could really make some noise with adding Quentin Johnston as kind of the centerpiece of this draft class.
So, flawed prospect. He's not crazy fast, and there were some drop issues he's going to have to address in the NFL, but he is a deep threat, and you don't have to run a 4.2 to be a legit deep threat. Again, I watched quite a bit of TCU football last year. Quentin Johnston can go and get it. He can get off the ball. He can beat a cover corner one-on-one. He can make contested catches. He's really good after the catch. He's a complete wide receiver. The Chargers have struggled with injuries at that spot the last couple of years. Keenan Allen's been in and out of the lineup. Mike Williams has been in and out of the lineup. Adding Johnston to that position group is another weapon for a passing attack that should be much more multifaceted next year for the Chargers, with Joe Lombardi out the door, one of the worst offensive coordinators in football. Hey, where'd he end up?
Where did
Denver?
He did go to Denver.
Yeah.
I was about to say I couldn't remember. They
worked.
really did that.
Yeah, they sure did. Yeah, it's Sean Payton's boy.
Man, Denver. I give Denver Broncos credit. They have given us an endless supply of fodder for jokes for both of our programs.
I absolutely love it. Just long story short with Quentin Johnson, I like the pick for the Chargers, and I think that it adds another dimension, more depth, which is what they really needed for Justin Herbert, because a lot of last year with the injuries, a lot of the last couple of years, really, he's been out there trying to make a crack with Josh Palmer and some other like smaller guys, and now they got the big body receiver, the biggest receiver that was taken in the first round last night. I like the fit for them. It's a good pick.
It really does. Looking at the couple other opponents, the big ones in the AFC for the Chiefs, Buffalo, Cincinnati, and Baltimore. With now their change there and what they're trying to do, Baltimore doing a lot of good things. Buffalo takes Dalton Kincaid, my guy, out of Utah. Cincinnati gets Miles Murphy at 28 to fall all the way to him, and then Baltimore adds Zay Flowers as well. Three very talented players. Looking at those three picks to those three teams, is there anyone that stands out to you that goes, oh my goodness, because they got this guy, they are so much more of a threat to the Chiefs coming up in the AFC this year?
Oh, are any of those guys Patrick Mahomes?
No, Dan, none of those are QB1.
Then no. I mean, it doesn't mean
it's fair.
It doesn't mean they didn't get better, but no, the Chiefs still got the big joker in the deck with number 15. But obviously, you and I were both heavily on the Dalton Kincaid hype train, and I think he is going to be a really good NFL player. I was interested that it was Buffalo. Buffalo's got a starting caliber tight end in Dawson Knox. It feels like Buffalo had some other needs. They're kind of a team. They were interesting picking where they did, and they moved up. Remember, they moved up 2 spots. They jumped Dallas because there was a lot of talk. Dallas wanted a tight end. They jumped Dallas to get their guy, make sure that they got Kincaid. But that was a Buffalo team that was short on edge rushers last year and really struggled up front. Their offensive line wasn't as strong, and maybe they felt at that point in the draft they didn't love Anton Harrison and felt like, the offensive lineman we need isn't here for us right now. And so the Kincaid pick is a good one, but it feels like a luxury pick for them.
It does. I would agree with that.
But, you can do worse than a luxury pick who might be the next Travis Kelce. So,
truly,
I'm not knocking the pick. I was surprised it was Buffalo's pick because I really thought they'd go with offensive line or edge rusher. I really thought they'd go in that direction. And instead they move up for Kincaid. For Cincinnati, they played the draft really well. I thought they were kind of a similar position to the Chiefs where they waited and let the board come to them and ended up being able to take a guy. If Tyree Wilson isn't the most athletically gifted pass rusher in the draft, it might have been this guy. It might have been Miles Murphy.
Might have been Miles Murphy.
Tremendously athletic coming off the edge. And Brandon made this point last night in our live stream. I thought it was a really good point that the Bengals have been able to generate pass rush without guys who are like premium athletic talents, right? Like Trey Hendrickson is a good NFL player. Sam Hubbard's a good NFL player.
But they're not premium athletes.
They're not what you call blue chip athletes, right? Like they don't light up the Spark scores, the RAS scores, anything like that. Here's a guy that does. That joins that pass rushing group, and it'll be very interesting to see how Lou Anarumo deploys him. As for Baltimore and Zay Flowers, I mocked that one correctly. I'll pat myself on the back a little bit. Really obvious fit that Baltimore needed a wide receiver, and Zay Flowers is a guy who just gets open. It was no secret. A lot of teams really liked him. It was no secret the Chiefs liked him. The guys who worked out with him for the Chiefs really liked him, and Baltimore goes and finally gets a premium wide receiver talent to play alongside Lamar Jackson. It was a big day for the Ravens yesterday. They extend Lamar and they get Zay Flowers. A good day of business for Baltimore.
It really was. And looking at those three teams and what they do, what I'm fascinated the most about with Buffalo, and this is a thought I kind of had, what if you would have gone to Kansas City, how much do they, because they have Dawson Knox, how much do they employ Dalton Kincaid as more of a lining up like a wide receiver, lining him up outside a little bit? So it's something he did at Utah. I don't know if you would go for double inline sets with Dawson Knox and Dalton Kincaid, but I'm fascinated by what they do. I'm fascinated by what all these teams do, but everyone did get better. But I think you made a good point, Dan. They don't have Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah. They didn't draft that guy.
It's impossible for them to draft Patrick Mahomes because that is not how the NFL draft works. No matter what, we will see as the rest of this draft goes through how much the Chiefs' primary competition does get better as the night rolls along. But it was definitely a good start for some of those teams that should not make you worried as a Chiefs fan. But no matter what, does mean that their direct competition did get a lot better. We'll take another time out here on Mike Duck. Coming next time for Everyone Loves the List. Who do we think had the best nights at the NFL draft in round one? Time for Everyone Loves the List here on Mic'd Up with Fulton and Dan. In our list today, Dan, who had the best first rounds of the NFL draft last night? What four teams do we think made out like bandits in the first round of the NFL draft? So for Dan, for you, who's number 4 and had the best first round last night?
Number 4 for me, I am going to go with the Indianapolis Colts because I think they got the best quarterback on the board in Anthony Richardson.
I think that's a very, very astute spot for it. For me, number 4 is very simple. It's Carolina Panthers. I think they got the best quarterback on the board.
Okay.
As much as I think Richardson can reach there, I think Bryce Young can also be right there with him. They got him there. They only got one pick, so it sits there at 4 for me, but I'm with the idea of, get a great quarterback to put in your team. In a minute, making up with a pretty good night.
Number 3 for me, maybe it's a homer pick, but the Seattle Seahawks ended up with 2 top talents in the top 20. Devin Witherspoon, the cornerback from Illinois, and Jackson Smith-Njigba. I thought the best wide receiver potentially on the board from Ohio State at number 20. Maybe not their most high priority positions of need, but they're going to really strengthen that roster. They're going to make them an NFC contender next year.
Number 3 for me, I have the Houston Texans. So I liked the players they got, but the amount that they had to give up to trade up for 3, I don't know how that will affect them going forward, the value that they had to do for that spot there. But You get CJ Stroud and you get Will Anderson. That's making up pretty good, but a lot was given up there to get back to 3.
Yeah, it was, but I still liked it a lot. I'm going to make them number 2 on my list. The Texans getting CJ Stroud and Will Anderson Jr., the top-ranked defensive player on most people's draft boards, and they get a quarterback they're comfortable with, finally addressing that need that they didn't address somehow in the top 15 of last year's draft. Aggressive by the Texans, certainly, but I think it was necessary aggression.
I think so, too. Number 2 for me, it is your Seattle Seahawks. You didn't have to move around to get any of those players. You get a fantastic corner, Devin Witherspoon, and you get the best wide receiver in the draft at pick 20. That's a really good draft for Seattle.
Number 1 for me, obviously, it's the Detroit Lions. No, I'm just kidding. It's the Philadelphia Eagles.
Easily.
It's the Eagles. Jalen Carter, Nolan Smith. Holy smokes.
They can't keep doing this. We can't keep allowing it. Number 1 for me as well is Philadelphia. They can't keep getting away with this. To quote what everyone else is quoting right now, they can't keep getting away with this. Absolutely absurd what Philadelphia is. And if you have your thoughts on who are the best or even worst drafts last night, let us know on the text line or let us know in the YouTube comments section as well. But we'll take a timeout. Coming up next, Matt Derrick will join us to talk the Chiefs draft. Normally we'd be heading to Kansas City, but we are in Kansas City, so we will share the same city, at least for right now, with our good friend Matt Derrick of ChiefsDigest.com as we bring him in to chat about the Chiefs' first round of the NFL draft and what they might do later today as well. Matt, first things first, though, how late of a night did you have last night up there at the facility? Because the Chiefs didn't pick till like 11 o'clock, and I know you probably didn't get out there till super late. How late was your night last night?
Well, for better or worse, I was actually working from home last night. I recently had this foot surgery, so off-season work done. So I'm on the sideline, but yeah, we finished up with the press conferences and the Zooms about midnight. So even at home, it was still a pretty late night.
You know, last time someone associated with the Chiefs got off-season foot surgery, they had a great season afterwards. So I'm just saying you and Patrick Mahomes have a few things in common after getting taken care of there, Matt. Going in, though, into the Chiefs pick, they make at pick 31, they go with the Kansas State edge rusher, Felix and Uzama. Just looking at the pick from a bird's eye view, how do you think Felix and Uzama will fit in with this Kansas City Chiefs team coming up in this upcoming season in 2023?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a really good fit. I think he's a little bit different flavor from what they've gotten a couple of other guys who would be in front of him right now, like with Charles Omenihu and with George Karlaftis. And I thought it was very notable, last night that Felix said that, he really looked up and admired Frank Clark, and that was kind of, edge rusher he wanted to be. That I think alone tells you a lot about Felix and his fit. Certainly he's got the motor, he's got the wherewithal that, that the Chiefs look for in some of those intangibles. But I thought it was also notable, Red Beach, talking about the fact that this was one of the young guys in the class, and that's something that the Chiefs love too. They love to take players that are maybe late bloomers or late developers or late to football that they feel like have performed extremely well and limited opportunities and have, therefore, a much higher ceiling. Travaris Ward was kind of one of those guys, in the sense that, 3 years ago, Felix was 215, 220 pounds, and has sculpted himself now into a legitimate NFL edge rusher. The Chiefs feel like that there's an incredibly high ceiling, and I think with his scheme fit for the Chiefs, it should be very favorable.
You speak, you bring up scheme fit, Matt, and I'm so thankful that you do. How do you think he does fit in with this team? How do you think he does slot in alongside George Karlaftis potentially, starting along the edge line or in that rotation with Charles Omenihu and Chris Jones and Mike Dana? How do you think Felix Uzama fits in to this current Chiefs rotational room?
Yeah, I mean, on the one hand, he's very fortunate, I think, to be coming in at a time when the Chiefs have been able to bulk up that room. I mean, it's not like George Karlaftis, who is coming in a year ago and is, expected to be a starter. In this case, they actually have the luxury for Felix to be able to come in and to be a backup, to be a rotational piece. But also, I think he's polished enough that he should also be able to get a little bit more work in early than maybe some other guys would in this spot. So, we're not talking about a guy who's going to be coming in and having to play 80% of the snaps, but I also don't think he needs to be playing 20 or 30. I mean, there's a bigger role for him, and that would be a way to be able to keep the other guys fresh too. I also think there's an ability to be pretty flexible with him, but I don't think there's any doubt. I mean, as an outside guy, somebody who can play on the pure edge, I think he's got a little bit more speed and a little bit more. You're talking about maybe playing like a 7 or a 9 tech and being able to line up wide. I think he fits that a little bit better than the other two guys do. Maybe on pure passing down, certainly you could see him on third down packages being somebody that comes in and where one of the other edges might kick inside. I can see Felix on the outside fitting in quite well with him. So I do. I think that there's, like I said, I think he is a different enough edge rusher from Karlaftis and from Amenahue that it gives the Chiefs a little bit different flavor and something else for Joe Cole, the defensive line coach, to work with.
Looking at the physical profile of Yundiki Uzama, he doesn't necessarily fit what we have often called like the Spags mold of, those bigger, longer, weightier defensive ends that he likes to do. This might be one of the first times they've kind of taken a little bit of a departure from that kind of setup. Do you think that there was any one particular trait in Felix Yundiki Uzama that made Spagnuolo comfortable going away from his other established trends and traits? Or did the Chiefs simply want to get a little bit different in the room? And maybe that is why they're more comfortable taking a non-standard mold defensive end for Spagnuolo's scheme.
Yeah, I think you hit on an interesting point there, which I think there's two parts of it. One is that I think that Steve Spagnuolo has certainly been evolving a little bit in his stint with the Chiefs. We talk about the classic Steve Spagnuolo guy, and I think, we're talking about a lot of the players he had in New York and some of his other stops. And, and sometimes that type of talent is just hard to find. I mean, he's looking for those long, lean guys that, have a lot of size to them and everything. And, and sometimes those are a premium. You can't always get those guys. Frank Clark is not one of those guys. I mean, he's very similar in stature to Felix, which, makes a good comparison for him. But, the other piece of it is that, bringing in Joe Cullen, you've got a guy who is used to working with, a little bit different pieces. Joe Cullen really wants guys who have some quickness and are able to get upfield. So on the one hand, you've got a defensive coordinator that I think is evolving in a little bit of the way that he deploys his defense. He certainly, I think, commits to using 3-4 fronts a lot more than he did in the past. So you've got Spags who's moving one direction as far as, just getting away from maybe a traditional 4-3 kind of a guy that uses more mixed fronts. And then you've got Cullen, who is really good at working with these types of players and fitting them into a defensive front. I think that's a pretty good marriage. I mean, Joe Cullen, you would say, a typical 3-4 guy, and Steve Spagnuolo, typical 4-3 guy. Where's the marriage? But I think in today's NFL, where you're using so many sub packages, and there's plenty of times when you are using 3-man fronts, that it just makes a lot more sense to be able to have guys like Felix that are flexible and to play multiple positions, and the size maybe doesn't matter as much.
Our guest is Matt Derrick. He's our Chiefs insider, appearing here on Mic'd Up with Jake and Fulton, except without Jake, and with Dan today here live on Radio Row at the NFL Draft. Matt joins the gang weekly here on Mic'd Up, and you can find Matt's work at Chiefs Digest on ChiefsDigest.com and on Twitter at Matt Derrick. See, Matt, I'm so thrown by the change and filling in here that I'm mispronouncing stuff and getting all kinds of stuff wrong. So let me go ahead and stop talking and just get into the question. Are you surprised the Chiefs did not move up or were not more aggressive in moving up for a player? Or did you feel like they might let the draft board come to them in the way that they did in last night's first round?
I mean, you definitely hit on a mantra there of Brett Veach's, which is, to try to let the board come to him. And Andy Reid preached that last night. He said that, that Brett was very patient. And that's not the word that we normally associate with Brett Veach. But I think in the first round, I mean, I think he's developed a little bit more of that. I think throughout the draft, he's been a little bit more patient, certainly from, I think, his first couple of drafts. And I think in general, it has served him well. Last night, it seemed like there were two competing things. I mean, one is that the Chiefs wanted to move up, but all the teams moving up knew that the Chiefs wanted a receiver, and they plan on taking a receiver as well. I mean, the one spot where you say the Chiefs were going to probably go to would be early 20s, and every team from 20 to 23 ends up taking a receiver. They're not trading with the Chiefs because they've expected that's what Kansas City was wanting to move up to get. Even with Dallas claiming that Kansas City, wanted to move up with them and they declined it because they wanted to take Mazi Smith. I'm not 100% sure that's not just, Cowboys blowing some smoke to make their pick look better. It could very well be the case. That's what the Chiefs wanted to do, was keep the move up there and get Mazi Smith as well. But, it was just difficult for them to find a partner, but difficult for the price too. I mean, the Chiefs were, by all accounts, interested in moving up, but maybe not paying the same premium that they paid last year for Trent McDuffie, because this is viewed as a little bit softer first round. And I think the activity last night, the unpredictability, suggests that's the case. And if that's true, I mean, and you're Brett Veach and you want to get value, there's no reason to overpay for moving up in the first round that you think is soft, even if it helps you fill a need that you want to fill.
Let's look at the other teams in the AFC West from last night. We obviously know Denver did not pick last night. They don't pick until the late 60s, so early in the third round tonight. Las Vegas got out with Tyree Wilson from Texas Tech, the edge rusher, with the 7th pick. The Chargers took Quentin Johnson, the wide receiver from TCU, at number 21 overall. How do you evaluate how those two AFC West teams came out of the draft as they try and keep up with the Joneses in red and gold here in Kansas City?
Yeah, I mean, Tyree Wilson's a good player. I certainly don't think there's any knock against that. I just don't know how much it really makes them better. You could even argue that maybe there were some other players that were a better fit. You could certainly also make the argument that the Raiders have been, and the entire AFC West last year, tried to load up on pass rushers and tried to beef up their pass and being able to get after the passer, and it didn't work against Patrick Mahomes. And that the answer to beating the Chiefs is that you're going to have to outscore them. And the Raiders haven't really done anything to help their offense. Whereas the Chargers, that's kind of the approach that they went. I mean, they're doubling down on offense. They have got a chance now, to bring in, and what I think is going to be a really good fit for them. I mean, you look at their offense, and you look at the guys like Keenan Allen and Mike Williams. I mean, Quentin Johnson should absolutely fit into that group. He's going to have some guys to learn from. Chargers are going to have to get younger and better at receiver and healthier at receiver. They're going to have some salary cap decisions to make here in the next couple of years. So this is what they need. I mean, they need to make that transition. So I think starting it with Quentin Johnson right now is a good step for them. Whether it's enough to help them catch up with the Chiefs, I don't know, but I think it was the smarter decision than the Raiders had.
Matt Derrick is our guest here on Mic'd Up with Fulton and Deanne this afternoon from NFL Draft Day 2 live from Radio Row here in Kansas City. Matt usually joins Mic'd Up on Tuesdays at this 12:30, but Matt being so gracious also join us here Friday at 1:35. You can follow Matt on Twitter at Matt Derrick. Matt, looking at some of the Chiefs' biggest competition in the AFC, obviously the Buffalo Bills and Cincinnati Bengals are kind of the top two, but the Baltimore Ravens now have Lamar Jackson back in the fold, and they added Odell Beckham Jr., and they're changing their offensive scheme. Looking at those three teams in particular, and just any other team in the AFC that you view could try and take that next step to challenge the Chiefs for AFC supremacy, what do you think of their drafts last night, and was there any pick that any AFC team made that you think really will start giving them a chance to start pushing and challenge the Chiefs for the AFC top crown, as it were?
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned three teams there that I thought made really smart decisions and really got good players. I mean, Baltimore, there's no doubt. I mean, they are trying to give Lamar Jackson more help in the passing game. I mean, they signed Odell Beckham. Now they add Zay Flowers to the mix. I mean, he should have more weapons. He's going to have more weapons than he's ever had before. And obviously, with that new contract, they need to be able to take a little bit of the pressure off of him. I think that's a really good pick. The Bengals, I think, with Miles Murphy, a very strong edge rusher from Clemson. I mean, that was a guy that a lot of teams probably had as one of their top 15 picks, legitimate first rounder. So that's good. I mean, the Bengals, they need to kind of reinvest in that front a little bit. We've seen how successful that they have been against the Chiefs with their pass rush and then allowing them to cover. So adding another guy like that, I think, is nice. But I tell you, the scariest one of them all, I think, is the Buffalo pick. I mean, if Dalton Kincaid is everything that we think that he can be and lives up to the potential, good grief, you add that and, pairing him with Knox and now the targets that the Bills have for Josh, I mean, that's going to be gosh, that's going to be scary. I mean, that's the Buffalo offense was already pretty potent. So I don't envy that anymore further. I mean, I thought the Bills were definitely going to be going the pass catcher. I didn't think they would go tight end, but having Kincaid fall in their lap and be able to move up to 25 to get him, that I thought was, I mean, that's a really good addition. I think that's going to make the Bills a lot more tougher.
As someone who touted Dalton Kincaid the entire draft process as my favorite player in this NFL draft, I'm incredibly bummed that's the Buffalo Bills of all teams that ended up having to take Dalton Kincaid last night. Moving on to day 2 of the NFL draft here, we're going to have round 2 and round 3 coming up from Kansas City, from Union Station, coming up tonight with the festivities beginning at 6 o'clock is when the first pick will be made, and the Pittsburgh Steelers will probably take Joey Porter Jr. off the draft because that makes the absolute perfect sense for them. For the Chiefs, they have, as of now, 1 pick in round 2, 1 pick in round 3. They're going to pick 63rd in round 2, 95th overall pick in round 3. Who do you think, or where do you think, more importantly, starting where, what positions do you think the Chiefs will target in round 2 and round 3 coming up in the draft tonight?
I mean, really, there's a few that I think you can cross off. I mean, Brett Veach crossed off a linebacker last night. Maybe he's just sandbagging us there, but I'll cross it off as well. I think you can cross off edge rusher since they've already addressed that one. Quarterback you can cross off. Center I think you can cross off. Anything else, honestly, I mean, I think is on the board. I mean, just depending on who is there. There is a pocket of receivers, however, that the Chiefs have really been interested in that are going to fall into that kind of late second, early third area. Might need to even move up a little bit if they want to make sure they get the guy that they want. The 2 players in that pocket that I think fit the Chiefs mold the best in the second round would be Marvin Mims from Oklahoma and Jonathan Mingo from Ole Miss. I mean, I think either one of them, they're a little bit different receivers, but I think both of them would really fit in. I mean, and there's some other names the Chiefs have been interested in kind of that range too. I mean, they've checked out Jalen Hyatt and A.T. Perry from Wake Forest is in there. Rashee Rice, is in that mix as well. But I to me, I think Mims and Mingo. I mean, Mims reminds me a lot as far as just size and speed to McCole Hardman. I think there's an easy, comp there. And Mingo, like I said, is a little bit bigger. I mean, he's a little bit, different receiver, but maybe a little bit more Sammy Watkins-esque. Like I said, it's a little bit different style. But I think those of those. Third round, I mean, it could go any direction, and I mean, and frankly, honestly, the Chiefs even the second. I mean, tight end, there's still some really good ones, including Michael Mayer that's still on the board. Even though the Chiefs addressed cornerbacks so much last year, there are so many good corners left. You mentioned Joey Porter, but Keely Ringo from Georgia, Julius Brents from K-State, the Chiefs have been interested in. Trey Hodges-Tomlinson from TCU might be a late third round guy that I think they could be interested in. Hey, you don't have, remember, L'Jarius Sneed signed up long term, so you got to be cognizant there. And cornerback is just so deep that might be a position that you want to take a look at, since these guys, this is probably the strongest group of corners that you're going to see in a while.
All right, Matt, final 2 questions, 2 for the road. First things first, you are Brett Veach. You are on the clock. You can make the pick. At 63rd overall pick in the 2023 NFL Draft, the Kansas City Chiefs select who?
You know what? I'm gonna go with Marvin Mims. I think it's the most likely.
Somewhere Jake LeBon is clapping.
Chance to be in there. I think he's got a good chance to be there. I mean, hey, if there's some tight ends that fall, I would definitely be tempted to move up. I tackle is obviously a possibility, but I think the Chiefs might try to address that more on Saturday.
I'm right there with you. We're going to give our full predictions for day 2. The rest of the day 2 picks coming up here in the 2 o'clock hour. But I think Dan and I are already pretty much in lockstep that pass catcher in some way is probably where they're going to go with that first pick coming up in round 2 coming up tonight. My final question for you, Matt. Our list today was teams that had the best NFL draft, best round 1 of the draft last night. Who do you think the team or teams who made out the best overall in the NFL draft last night?
I don't think there's a doubt. Philadelphia Eagles. I mean, they just absolutely backed into building up that defensive line once again. I mean, Jalen Carter, I mean, honestly, he would not have been on my board because I just would have been too concerned with the off-the-field issues and maybe the attitude. But there's no doubt. I mean, he's absolutely a top 5 talent. So getting that is crazy. And Nolan Smith, I mean, if I was the Chiefs, I would have tried to move up to get him. that I think he's just that good. I mean, these are two players that I would have said are top 15 guys, and for them to be able to get him 10 and 30, that's just incredible. So I'll give it to the Eagles.
Matt, you do the best work covering the Chiefs of anybody we know. We appreciate it. As always, that is Matt Derrick of ChiefsDigest.com. You can follow Matt on Twitter at Matt Derrick. Matt, thank you so much, my friend, and have a good rest of the final 2 days of the draft, and hopefully the Chiefs can make us all happy.
You too. Have a great time down there. It looks like it's been a great show down at Union Station.
It's been a lot of fun, Matt. I wish you could have had a chance to come down and check it out, my man.
Have fun. Take care, everybody.
That is Matt Derrick of ChiefsDigest.com. Matt, right there with us. Chiefs maybe thinking a pass catcher in round 2.
I agree with him. I think that's the move.
Dan and I will give our full thoughts on round 2 and round 3 coming up at the 2 o'clock hour. But that'll do it for the 1 o'clock hour of Mic'd Up. We got the final 30 minutes of the show coming up next here on 580 WIBW. It is time for the final 30 minutes of Mic'd Up with Fulton and Dan here on 580 WIBW. Just a half hour left in the show before we pass the baton off to the Royals Radio Network as they take on the Minnesota Twins. Eventually. This has just been reported by Joel Goldberg of Valley Sports Kansas City that the Royals game and the Twins will start in a delay. We will hand it off to the Royals Radio Network at 2:30. It'll be their job to
rain delay
take
theater.
Yes, rain delay theater.
We call it.
I wonder what canned interview is going to be played to cover the interview today.
Man, they ran that. Like, I couldn't believe how long that Mike Sweeney interview was. The Atlanta game that started in a delay a couple Saturdays back. They ran a Mike Sweeney interview. They talked about everything. I swear to God, they were going to start talking about. So now in Little League, tell us about the team you played on when you were 8 years old. Like, wide-ranging conversations for Rain Delay Theater. But that's what we'll have for you when we hand it off to the Royals Radio Network, barring a change in the game's status in the next 23 minutes. But we do understand that the game will start in delay. They had the tarp out earlier. It's going to be a pretty gray day up there in Minnesota, but they've got all afternoon to figure it out.
Yeah.
And the Royals Radio Network will take it from us at 2:30.
This is one of the benefits of them playing this game at 3:10 today, is that even if you have a rain delay, well, you kind of do have the entire afternoon and evening to get the game in. So even if it was, a 2.5 hour delay, they could still get that game in promptly without really messing up their schedule going forward. So we will do that. That is coming up here at 2:30. We will pass that baton off. Coming up here in the final half hour of the show with Dan and myself, we're going to look at day 2 of the NFL draft, round 2, round 3 tonight. What will the Chiefs do? Who do we think they will take? What positions do we think they will target? And overall, what do we think how the draft will unfold here in day 2, and even maybe take a little look at day 3 as well. As always, you can join in on the conversation on our text line, 785-272-9429, and in the live comment section of our YouTube live feed. As always, go to youtube.com. Sports on 580 is the YouTube channel. Please subscribe if you have not. We would appreciate it. You can jump in the comment section as well. Dan, on the text line, the Bard has chimed in about the Royals and Chiefs today. We got a combo.
Okay.
We got a combo one.
I see you, Bard.
The Chiefs' future prospects stay sunny, but the Royals are 6-20. Scoring's an issue. I might need a tissue. Their suckiness isn't real funny. Always
tough.
Bangers.
That's tough.
Always nothing but absolute bangers, and also incredibly correct that this team is really brutal and bad. And once we're done here, Dan, even though the draft will be distracting me a little bit, I will probably still be watching every inning of the Royals tonight because apparently I'm a glutton for punishment.
It looks like the rain should clear up by, I don't know, by at least 5 o'clock. They might be delayed a while. They might be about an hour delay.
Might be a little bit of an hour of Royal. They might actually bust out that Sweeney interview at this point to really chew up some
rain
time.
delay theater, baby.
Going back to the NFL draft here, day 2 is coming up today. 6 o'clock is when the action will start, when the Steelers will go on the clock, officially on the clock. And then they'll probably drain like 7 minutes because they need to do it for TV time or whatever. Because they have to mention the Steelers know who they're picking at this point. But the Chiefs are set to pick 63 overall, last pick of the second round, and then pick 95 overall in the third round, kind of right before the compensatory selections begin. Let's start with the round 2 pick. You and I think are pretty much in a long step here. It really feels like pass catcher, mainly wide receiver, based on both what the Chiefs need and, more importantly, the way the board is shaping out to be. It feels like wide receiver is going to be the move coming up here at pick 63.
Well, we thought going into the draft that the high-end guys would all go in the first round. And with one exception, they all did. There were 4 wide receivers and 1 tight end taken last night. I thought there were going to be 2 tight ends. Michael Mayer not being drafted, the tight end from Notre Dame, was very surprising to me, and I think to a lot of other people as well. So the pass catcher crop was always, I think, expected to come back into play in the later part of round 2. You've got guys available like Jalen Hyatt and Jonathan Mingo, Marvin Mims, lots of guys that we've talked about at great length here. And the tight end spot is one that's interesting as well, because not only is Michael Mayer still out there, the big fella from Georgia, Darnell Washington, is still on the board. Luke Musgrave from Oregon State, Tucker Kraft from North Dakota State. Some good prospects, maybe not the kind of prospects that Mayer and Kincaid are in that position, but some good, solid tight end prospects are on the board should the Chiefs go that route. That's what I've got my eye on. I still think they need to address that position. I understand that they were maybe not able to move up and get the guys they really loved because, well, you pick 31st. Sometimes the guy you loved, sometimes, maybe they wanted to draft Will Anderson. Well, he wasn't going to get to number 31. Well, what are you going to do? So they didn't get a chance to get the wide receiver talent maybe that they really liked last night, but that's still a position, I think, with some depth to it. And when you combine that with the depth at tight end in this draft, a really rare level of depth at the tight end spot, there are going to be opportunities, I think, for the Chiefs either to stay put at 63 and find a player they like, or maybe even move up into the middle potentially, like they did for Sky Moore last year. They moved up, 4 spots for him? I don't remember how many it was, but they moved up a handful of spots to go get Sky Moore last year. I could see a repeat scenario where the Chiefs have a wide receiver or tight end in mind that they really like, and they jump up a handful of spots, maybe cash in one of those 4th-round picks or a 5th-round pick to move up and get that player.
Is there any particular pass catcher that's left on the board that you really look at? Because, I know all of us pretty much here on the Sports on 580 team are Marvin Mims fans at this point. Is there, and of course, Mims obviously is one of those guys we would all be there for, but overall, are there any specific pass catchers that you go, if that guy's available for the Chiefs either at 63 or if he's available, in the mid-40s for them to go up and try and go up and attack and get, is there any specific pass catcher that you have got your eye on of Chiefs? He would be perfect in the Chiefs system to learn and develop with the Chiefs.
The thing I like best about Marvin Mims is the fact that he averaged 19 yards per catch.
Yeah, he did.
When we talk about Chiefs wide receivers, the thing that they seem to really prioritize is that ability after the catch, that ability to make things happen in the open field. And I think Marvin Mims has that ability in ways that a lot of the other receivers still on the board maybe don't. So that's why, in my mind, Mims has always been a really good fit. But there are some other ones. We mentioned Jonathan Mingo out of Ole Miss, complete player, really good target. He could be a guy that's around. Cedric Tillman's another Tennessee wide receiver. I know we talked about Jalen Hyatt. Cedric Tillman kind of in a similar vein, but not maybe the top end speed of a Jalen Hyatt. I like Hyatt. I like him better in the 2nd round than I would have liked him at number 31, but I don't think he's getting to 63. I don't think there's any chance of that happening.
Too much speed.
Yeah, at this point in the 2nd round, you look at the speed he has and say, okay, maybe the route tree's limited, but go get it, guy. In round 2 is pretty good thing to have. I'm trying to think. A.T. Perry, that was the name. It was on the tip of my tongue, and I couldn't come up with it. A.T. Perry out of Wake Forest kind of reminds me of George Pickens. Like there's a big and a physical element to him as an outside receiver. The Chiefs haven't necessarily prioritized that kind of player, but I like the idea of a wide receiver that can work the grimy areas of the field to get over the middle, the sidelines, and get some tough yards, kind of the role that Juju Smith-Schuster played for them last year. And a bigger body like an A.T. Perry might be more apt to be able to do that as a rookie. So those are just a couple of names I'd throw out. The tight end group, Darnell Washington is like if you put a refrigerator on a football field and put him in a uniform and then he ran a 4.7. Like he's ridiculous.
He's something else, man.
And he's just learning the position. So like there's a ceiling for him that maybe a little bit of a lower floor than some other guys at that position like Kraft or Laporte, Sam Laporta from Iowa, or Mayer. But I think a really high ceiling for him. He could be a really fun pick at 63 there too, or later in the 1st round if they move up.
My favorite thing always about Darnell Washington is the video clip that was played or made the rounds of the tight ends doing the sled drill. And all the other tight ends would hit the sled, and it'd move just a little bit, but it would take some turning. Darnell Washington treated that sled like it was on ice. Like it was just nothing to move. And Darnell Washington's such a fascinating player if the Chiefs went tight end, if they could get him, because of his physical attributes, being as big as he is, being as heavy and strong as he is, but also definitely showing some refinement as a receiver, as a tight end. His problem was he played with who's going to be the best tight end in the NFL draft next year, the year after, and Brock Bowers. That was Darnell Washington's problem, was it's hard to take snaps from a guy who is like, as much as we think Dalton Kincaid and Michael Mayer are as good as they are, Brock Bowers is a better football player than either of those two, and he's still sitting there at Georgia. That affected definitely what Darnell Washington's stock or what his statistics could have been. I'm with you on a lot of those names. A.T. Perry is such an interesting one to me because I feel like it's not been floated around a lot, or at least widely known what he'll do or what he would bring to a team or bring around. But I think a bigger body like that would help. Jonathan Mingo out of Ole Miss fascinates me. And if he could fall to the Chiefs in this round, or what he could do for the Chiefs in round 2, because I know everyone sees, Ole Miss wide receiver, about 6'2", fairly built, good after the catch. Everyone wants to start having A.J. Brown fantasies at that point. And I don't think at all Mingo would become that guy because, A.J. Brown's one of the best wide receivers in the NFL right now. But bigger body, can move after the catch, showed some different things at Ole Miss in a subpar Ole Miss offense. I don't know, it's one of those where I, would not have liked him a lot higher in the draft. But, Jonathan Mingo falls to at 63, or even if it's either in the high 50s, I think that's a guy that also can maybe fit with the idea of a bigger bodied wide receiver to try and bring something different to the Chiefs offense. And I think that's what's so important. If they go pass catcher in round 2, round 3 feels like that's where an offensive lineman could come if they want, because I think we're moving to the point where maybe Lucas Niang is the starter at right tackle, but some kind of depth at offensive line would be helpful as well. I think maybe the 3rd round seems to be the right spot. Again, it's always dependent on where the board shakes out and what the board falls to. But it feels like to me round 3 might be the right spot to maybe address an offensive lineman. So then it's not as much pressure for them to have to start. And if they do, it's just a nice surprise.
So Dane Brugler of The Athletic did a rounds 2 and 3 mock draft after last night, and he does have the Chiefs taking an offensive lineman in the 3rd round, Jalen Duncan out of Maryland, a player that we've seen mocked to the Chiefs in around the 3rd, 4th round in some previous mocks. I think you're outside the range if you're the Chiefs of a starting caliber offensive tackle.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think you are still within the range of bringing in a player who could push Lucas Niang for the starting right tackle position or push for a spot at left tackle, depending on their athleticism and their pedigree. I did think when this draft cycle kind of started that it felt like that was a position where if the premium guys didn't last until 31, that the Chiefs were going to wait and address on day 2 was offensive tackle. So I think that is a direction that they could very well go tonight as well. I think pass catcher and offensive tackle make a lot of sense for them. But if they go off the board, Fulton, let's say they don't do that. Like, because we talked about this for a month, right? Like
we did.
They need an edge. They need a pass catcher. And they need an offensive tackle.
It's not always how it works, though.
Okay, yeah. Well, let's say they don't check those boxes in that exact order in rounds 2 and 3. If they went off the board, where would you like to see them go?
If they go off the board, I think personally I'd like to see corner. And I know that, it is an interesting spot. And given what the Chiefs have, you might think, man, they have corners. L'Jarius Sneed's entering the final year of his contract. There's not a guarantee that you'll be able to make an extension work with L'Jarius Sneed. If that's the case, if one of those premium corners, like let's say Kali Ringo falls all the way to, 55, 56, I wouldn't, bat an eyelash if the Chiefs traded up to go get Kali Ringo. And you might look at it, and, Chiefs fans might look at it and go, oh my goodness, you just drafted all those corners last year. You have L'Jarius Sneed. Why are you adding a corner? I think it's a good long-term play and gives you insurance if L'Jarius Sneed is not able, if you're not able to come into some sort of an agreement on an extension with him. I'd like to see that. That's my number 1 spot. If they went off the road, we're thinking corner, I'd be cool with. Safety as well in the defensive backfield. Really, the only 2 spots where I'd go, I would be, a level of potential, for lack of a better word, upset, is linebacker or running back. Because I just don't think those are 2 spots you need as linebacker just as a spot, period. And running back in round 2 and round 3, given what they would do for the Chiefs. Isaiah Pacheco is your lead horse. I think they should get a running back in this draft. But I think like 5th or 6th or even 7th again is where you should probably look. But for me, some of the defensive backfields where I would like them to see if they go off the board from what we're thinking.
I'll tell you this. If they went running back in round 3, if Tyjae Spears is sitting there at 95 out of Tulane and they took him,
That's fair.
That would be such a weapon.
That would be fair.
Such a weapon in this offense. I mean, it's tantalizing to think about another young and multifaceted running back to join that position. But I think it's more likely that if they do take a running back, that might be with a 7th-round pick. Like they struck gold with Pacheco last year. Maybe they think they can do it again.
They might be able to. Going kind of outside of the Chiefs here, 2 more K-Staters expected to be drafted, possibly, one of them as early as today, the other one probably coming up tomorrow. Deuce Vaughn and Julius Brents. With the way the boards have shaken out here and fallen, do you have any different thoughts or different opinions on where Brents or Vaughn might fall or where they might end up, given now that we've known a little bit how the draft board's shaken out a little bit?
Now, no change in my evaluation of Vaughn. I don't think he goes today. I think he's a day 3 pick, 5th, maybe 6th round. As far as Brents, there were some rumblings that maybe he was going to get some late 1st round interest. So maybe those teams picking late in the 1st round didn't address corner in a way that you thought they might have wanted to, like Cincinnati, for example, might be hoping that he falls back down to them at the top of the draft. The thing that complicates it from the Brents' perspective is that teams that need a corner, they might be looking at Joey Porter Jr., who was projected to be a top 20 pick and is still there as we began day 2. But I do think Brents goes at some point in the 2nd round. I think he'll be a 2nd-round pick tonight. There's a lot of good corners still out there. Cam Smith from South Carolina is still there. You mentioned Ringo, Michigan's DJ Turner. But I think Julius Brents finds a home tonight. And I'll go ahead and I'll say Cincinnati at 60 is where Brents winds up.
That feels like unless somebody moves up, that just feels like the right spot for Julius Brents as far as terms of who needs what and where. I think Cincinnati at 60 would be such an interesting spot for him to fall. I'm right there with you on Deuce Vaughn. It's talented player as he is with the size and other things. I think he does fall to a day 3 pick. So it might be till tomorrow. We have to figure out where Deuce Vaughn's NFL home will be. But there's a chance after Felix Uzama's name got called at the midnight hour, or more specifically 11 o'clock hour last night for pick 31. Maybe Julius Brents gets his name called this afternoon as well, and we can have back-to-back days and maybe even a 3rd straight day of a K-State player being selected to join the ranks of the NFL. We'll take our final time out here on Mike Depp. When it comes up next, we'll get you the mic drop before we hand it off to the Royals Radio Network. Wrapping things up here on the short edition of Mic'd Up by 30 minutes, thanks to the Royals Radio Network, live from day 2 of the NFL Draft here in Kansas City. Dan, before we get to the mic drop, this has been fun. And not just being at the NFL Draft, but having you with me for the past 2 days has been a pleasure. And I thank you for your time here.
Thank you for saying
I
that.
hope you have enjoyed getting to be a part of a little bit of a different program the past 2 days.
Yeah, it's been fun.
I'm no Brendan Dorzinski. I know that.
A little bit of opposite day the last couple of days. But no, it has been a good time. Are you ceding the floor to me for the mic drop?
I will cede the floor to you to begin the mic drop for this final mic'd up of this week.
Very gracious host. Mic drop for me. What a neat story Felix Anudike Uzama is, from lightly recruited, and lightly is doing a lot of work in that sentence, coming out of Lee's Summit, to being a player who absolutely burst onto the scene with Kansas State at just 19 years old, with those 11 sacks he had 2 years ago, and then to be the Big 12 Defensive Player of the Year and help K-State to a Big 12 championship, and now to be a first-round draft pick with the draft in his hometown by the hometown team that he grew up rooting for. That's a Hollywood script right there. And I think that Felix is a good enough prospect to continue the fairy tale on through to a very successful NFL career. I think he'll be impactful right from the go as a pass rusher, and I think he should have a similar impact to what George Karlaftis did out of Purdue last year for the Chiefs, in terms of being a guy who can impact the pass rush right away, have about half a dozen sacks, make some big plays. And I'll tell you what, he's going to sell a lot of jerseys too, especially in the Manhattan, Riley County area.
He's going to, I could have said it better myself, Dan. Yeah, he's going to sell a lot. There'll be a lot of Felix Anudike Uzama Chiefs jerseys in the Manhattan and Riley County area, 100%. For the Chiefs coming up here in day 2 for my mic drop, there's not really a lot of ways that I would be potentially upset with where their pick should be. I'm intrigued to see what's going to happen today. I think they can make their team a lot better today. We talked about the board was falling in favor of the Chiefs coming up in the first round last night. Did not fully keep that way as it was falling in the way that round 1 was unfolding. I think round 2 and even round 3 could be much of the same way. Seeing what they end up doing, who they end up picking, what type of routes they go. Maybe this is when Brett Veach tries to trade up, because it might be a little bit easier to get a price for a trade up in round 2 versus round 1 with some of those AFC teams. Even NFC teams maybe want to get a little bit more willing to give the Chiefs some ammunition, seeing what they try and move up for coming up here in day two of the NFL draft. That'll do it for Mic'd Up this week. There's no 580 Sports Talk today, with them being off for the Royals Radio Network, as the Royals Twins will eventually start playing baseball at some point as well. We will end up passing the baton off to them as they will go through their rain delay theater for the Royals and Twins matchup coming up here. That will do it for this entire week of program here on Sports on 580. Keep locked into our YouTube channel this weekend. We will have reactions to the Chiefs day 2 picks coming up. We won't do a full live show today, but we will have live reaction to the Chiefs round 2 and round 3 picks. We'll also try and get some live reaction to the day 3 picks coming up tomorrow as well. So just stay tuned in to Sports on 580, our YouTube channel, and Sports on 580 on Twitter. We will give you the updates on what those will be. But for now, we will get ready to set the hand it up to the Royals Radio Network. I once again thank Dan Lucero joining me for Mic'd Up for these last 2 days. But it'll be back to me and Jake LeBlanc coming up on Monday. We'll be back in full stride as Dan also goes back to joining Brendan Dorzinski for 580 Sports Talk. But for now, we'll hand it off to the Royals Radio Network as they get set to take on the Minnesota Twins up in Minneapolis.